You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited because I have Nicole Stanley on the line, and I brought Nicole on because we're going to talk about the intersection of motherhood and being a business owner. So hey Nicole, how are you?
Hey, Tiffany, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me for this important topic because I feel like I said before we hit record, we don't talk about this enough.
Yeah, I would agree that motherhood is one of those things that you kind of just pretend isn't going on when you start a business sometimes. And so I'm sure a lot of your listeners might either be moms or they currently have businesses, or even if they're working moms, my hope is that they can get something from this episode.
For sure. So let's hop right in. Let's talk a little bit about your journey first, just so we can have a good solid background. I know people know most of mine, but of course I'll share throughout. So how did you become a business owner? Like what sparked that interest?
Yeah, so I was working before I had my first child in 2017, and I worked first in corporate sales, and then I worked in youth ministry, and I decided to stay home with my first just because I thought that this is what I should want to do. And I really struggled actually with being a stay-at-home mom, just my personality. And I started writing about personal finance. My husband and I had been on a personal finance journey from when we got married in 2015. And I would say that learning about personal finance really changed the course of our life. We were, pretty average couple, just stressed, had student loans, some car debt. But I found that our financial stress really affected most of our engagement, our early marriage. And we decided to get educated about personal finance. And that's when we first started to dive in. We took our first course and I became obsessed. So I was actually writing a personal finance blog for fun. And I did not know that financial coaching was a thing or, any of the business kind of stuff. I didn't even have that on my radar. It wasn't until I started just naturally helping friends and family for free that I started to realize, oh my gosh, this is actually wildly fun. People can make amazing progress with their money when they have somebody, on their side, somebody to help them plan, strategize, make good decisions. And I kind of put that little nugget in my head as to, I wonder if I did this and I made it a business. And it wasn't until 2020 when my husband was furloughed from his job where we kind of looked at each other and said, okay, well, we don't have any income, so why don't we start charging people? And that's really when I kind of dove headfirst into learning about becoming a business owner. I got trained as a financial coach and I had my second child. He was about 3 months old when I launched my company in 2020. And since then, I've been able to build the business to have 2 other full-time employees outside of myself on the team. And I've been able to help hundreds of clients all over the world become more confident and successful with their money through financial coaching.
Wow. Awesome. And, as you're talking, I'm just thinking about how similar our stories are. I mean, different in ways, but very similar. And I always tell people like necessity breeds innovation. So it was like, it came about that he got furloughed and you're like, okay, well, let's try this. And then just kind of went for it. So I love that aspect of the story. So let's talk about being a mom while all of this is going on, because I know for me, for instance, when I went full-time entrepreneurship back in 2019, a lot of people were concerned, like, Tiffany, you're a single mom, you have 2 kids, what are you going to do? All of that stuff. So what type of things did you think about as you were preparing? You didn't have much of a headway, but as you were preparing to do this, what were some things you considered?
When I was starting my business, one of the big questions for me was how I could balance being a mom and doing something else. I grew up believing that kind of being a mom was like the only thing you were doing when you were a mom, and that kind of sucks up everything. And for me personally, that was a little bit difficult because I actually became a much more fulfilled mom when I had something I could do that was around my own interests, that reminded me that I'm still a person, right? And I think that's different for everybody, right? But in my own life, I realized that me having something as a woman and as an individual to be interested in helped me be even more present as a mom. So while I initially struggled with some guilt because going from stay-at-home mom to full-time entrepreneur means I'm going to be spending less time with my kids, right? I'm going to be having other things that I'm doing. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people because many women feel like we have to be moms and almost nothing else. And that makes us somehow less than a mom. And so my husband and I talked a lot about kind of the difference between just time with my kids versus who I am when I get to be with my kids. And I think that that's why women pursuing what they're passionate about actually brings a lot of life to the family. And that's what I found in mine, at least.
To your point, a lot of people think that when you're an entrepreneur, you just have all this time in the world, you could spend more time with your kids and things like that, which could be true to a certain extent. But I always warn people, like, be prepared to work your butt off at first.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you first start. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that was part of your story as well. And personally, like just this week, I got a babysitter in my new environment, and I have been more productive in the past, 2 to 3 days now than I've been the whole entire time I've been here. So I highly recommend, I usually, when I was back home, I would work outside the home or, just having that separation, I feel really helps as a business owner.
Yeah, it really does. And I think it helps having, the ability to have childcare because when I first started my business, it was my husband and I kind of passing our kids back and forth during COVID. And I know a lot of women who are working and starting a business, they're doing that. And that's a very valid part of starting up is when you don't have childcare yet because you don't have the income. And I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers to women starting a business because we don't have that necessarily built in.
Absolutely. And honestly, I had many a long nights just so I can work on my business. I would be up in early mornings, right? 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, waking up at 6 to get them on the bus, all of those different things just to make sure that I realized this dream. But to the point that you said before, I feel like me having this passion project really have infused in my kids more love, more caring, more, being in the moment at times, and also sharing with them. So my sons and, well, my daughter's too little now, but my sons, they've expressed interest in being entrepreneurs as well because they see mom doing it. So it really has a lot of benefits when it comes to entrepreneurship. Now, we hit a little bit on some of the struggles and some of the things that, you've thought about during this process. What is one thing that if you could go back, you would do differently as a business owner / mom?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. I think that if I could go back and do something differently, it would probably be to not agonize so much over getting help at the beginning. When I started my business, I had invested in a financial coaching training program. And at the time, it was a really large investment for me, right? I didn't have clients yet. I didn't know what I was going to be. When I would get clients, I was literally about to pop with my second. And I remember just agonizing over it. I think it took me about a year. And once I, got the training, I finally had the confidence and I was able to get clients. And so looking back, I think that year was probably too long for agonizing. And so I could have started a lot sooner because I wouldn't have just been hemming and hawing over the idea of spending money on myself or spending money on my own development, which I think is really hard when you're starting a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're is this going to work out? I have bills coming up. Like, is this a good investment? Like, there's so much that goes into that thought process when you're first starting, and you don't want to waste money because everything is, essential. Like every dime, every penny is essential to a small business when you're first starting. So I can definitely agree with that. I think for me, I wish I would have hired help sooner. So it wasn't until I was 3 years into my business, like 2 or 3 years into my business, when I hired my first person. And honestly, like hindsight 2020 now, I'm like, oh, I should have hired somebody sooner, because I, am a self-proclaimed perfectionist. But letting go of that perfection is really what helped me move forward for sure.
Yeah, I totally identify with that as well.
Okay, we talked about trials. Let's talk about triumphs. What would you say is your biggest thing that you've accomplished while being an entrepreneur and a mom? And it can be related to family or it can be related to business. But what is the biggest thing that I would say being an entrepreneur has helped you do when it comes to your family or your business?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship has a way of really like refining perfectionism, in the sense of, when I look back at my life before I started my business, I just was so paralyzed by what others thought of me. And I remember just agonizing over the first Instagram posts and the first times that I got on stories or the first blog posts that I wrote, because I was so afraid of what others would think about me. And I wasn't really thinking about the people that I wanted to help. I was thinking more about how I appeared, where now I feel almost totally on the other side of that. Like, I'm able to really speak to the people who need financial coaching services more so than I'm thinking about how my friends or family might be perceiving me at the time. And I think that that's bred like a lot of confidence in other places in my life, where I've kind of realized that people can disagree with you. They can, not care, whatever it might be. And like life still goes on. So I feel like the stakes of kind of how I was living became a lot lower, if that makes sense. Like the stakes of making a mistake. I see that as a triumph, because when I look back at myself before I started a business, I see someone who was really scared, somebody who was just so concerned about what others thought. And I think the other thing that I look at as a huge triumph is I have a full-time coach on my team. And for the longest time, it was like, I want to become the best financial coach to help the most amount of people that I can. And then you kind of hit that limit of how many people you're able to help, because there's only so many hours in the day. And so my next goal became, well, how can I train someone to be an even better coach than I am, so that both her and I can be helping people, and it kind of multiplies, right? And I would say that really getting to that point with the people on my team has been like a slow and steady process. But now that we're there, where I can say, oh my gosh, like, I'm so happy to see that somebody else is able to give people amazing results, that's able to get clients, saving more, all of that. Like, that feels like something that I never would have dreamt of a few years ago.
Yes. And not only that, you're giving someone else opportunity as well. Like when you're
Yes.
hiring someone, whether they're a contractor or employee, you're either helping their business or you're helping their family as well, while they're helping other families. So
Yes.
it's like the gift that keeps on giving. So I definitely agree with that. Now, one more question I have for you before we wrap it up. And that is, if you could give my listeners, if someone was listening and they're like, I'm a mom and I want to be an entrepreneur, or I'm a beginner entrepreneur, what is one tip that you would give them?
I would say my first tip is, don't ask people who haven't done it if you can do it. It would be to search for other women, other moms who are doing the types of things that you want to do, and start to surround yourself with those voices, because the worst kind of poison for a new business is all the objections that other people have about the business, right? Like, people who don't run businesses, all they have are the reasons why moms can't do it. Where if you start to surround yourself with other moms who have, what you're going to find is they've found solutions that they can share with you. They have encouragement. They can also empathize with you with what you're going through, because starting a business is not a walk in the park. And if anybody's selling you an idea that it's a walk in the park, they're probably full of crap. So, you need to have other moms, other women in your life who you're able to talk to about the struggles that you're going through so they can help you brainstorm. I think that surrounding yourself with those women can be the difference between a business that never gets off the ground and a business that's really successful, because you were able to get through those hard beginnings, right?
Yes. Yes. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I tell people all the time, like, who you surround yourself with really has an effect on how you currently see yourself, but also your future self as well. So definitely agree with that tip. And thank you so much for sharing. Now, if people were interested, so if somebody's like, okay, Nicole, I want to take your tip and use it now, and I want you to be part of my team.
Yeah.
How could people find you or, follow you on social media?
Yeah. So you can find us on Instagram at arise.financial.coaching. We put out free financial information for women, for small business owners. And if you're a small business owner currently and you feel like your finances are holding you back, that might be a time to reach out to a financial coach. So you can always book a call with us. We can talk about whether or not financial coaching is what you need, but we make sure that people use their money in a way that helps them achieve the things they want and not look at money as the thing that's holding them back.
I love it. And if you all are listening and you didn't catch all of that, I will have all of that in the show notes as well. And you have two examples right here. Me and Nicole, we're mothers and we're doing entrepreneurship. So it's possible. And so just get the help that you need if you need any. So thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on the show today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany.
Bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.